Hello guys, welcome to another video, and today we're going to be looking at what it takes to become a back-end developer. And so if you don't know what's a back-end developer, it's important for you first to understand what a front-end developer is. So a front-end developer is the person who creates everything you can see up front. Now a back-end developer is the person who implements all the logic in the back to make sure everything is working smoothly. And so his role is quite important. So he's the one in charge of the databases, he's the one in charge of all the logical links in the back to make sure that the front end is working very well. So the front end is all about aesthetics and all, but now after the front end at the back, you have a lot of logic that happens and makes sure that the front end is actually coherent. So now to become a backend developer, there are a lot of very complicated things we need to learn. And so we're going to begin right from the top, which is the internet. Back end, front end, you need to learn what the internet is and how it works. Now moving past that, you have at least to have a basic knowledge of the front end. You are not just going to be building separately from the front end, even though back end and front end can be distinct tasks, but it's always important to know how whatever you're doing at the back end is going to be received on the front end. So you have to have at least a basic knowledge of the front end. Now moving on, you have to learn at least OS and general knowledge, so how an operating system operates and how you can make use of that. So it's very important as well, because you are going to be implementing a logic that will be dependent on the operating system. So whatever you do on Mac is not necessarily how you're going to doing it on Windows, so you have to take that into consideration. So moving then, you have to learn a back-end language, and there are quite a couple of them: Rust, Go, Java, C#, PHP, JavaScript, Python, Ruby. There are a lot of backend languages, so you can choose one or a combination of them and you learn how to use them and learn how to implement them. Now moving past that, you have to learn as well version control, which is very important. You have to now move on to now what they call databases, and this is a huge part of a backend developer's job. You have to learn what databases are and how they operate. So you have two types of major databases: relational databases and NoSQL databases, which are kind of you can go with one and you can go with the other, but I don't think you can use both. But it really depends on your project and how it works before you can choose either one of them. So essentially you want to first of all learn relational databases before learning NoSQL databases, because NoSQL is kind of recent, but relational databases have been there like forever. So in relational databases you have things like PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB, MS SQL, and Oracle. So essentially I'll refer you to MySQL as a starting point before diverting onto the others. Now when you master the relational databases, now you can go and learn some additional things about databases that you need to master. Actually, you have ACID, transaction, N+1 problem, and so on and so forth. So this additional knowledge you have to know about databases to ensure that whatever you do in your database works accurately. So a backend developer's job is quite important and quite reliant on databases. So you want to have a good mastery of what they are. Now, after learning relational databases, if you want to explore more, you can get into NoSQL databases as well. They have a whole different logic to them, but it's not quite complicated to get into, and you can equally have a good stroll over there and learn a lot of things. Now moving on there, you have now to learn about APIs, and essentially what APIs are: application programming interfaces. They permit you now to link your back end and your front end. So the link between whatever happens to the front end and whatever happens to the back end are what are called APIs. They are these interfaces which permit this communication. So it's also something very important, and in that light you have like REST, you have JSON API, SOAP, and so on and so forth. So you're not necessarily going to learn all of them, but you have a basic notion of all of them and you master just one. I think REST is the most popular, so you can definitely start from there. Now moving on from there, now you have to learn caching, web security knowledge as well, which is very important as a backend developer. You want to make sure that your data is well received and is accurate and does not lost in its integrity. That's why you need to learn caching, and you have to also learn about web security, because if you're building everything in the back end, it isn't because we can't see it in the front end that it cannot be accessed. So you have to you have to be well aware of that. Then moving from there, now you have to learn testing, CI, continuous integration, and CD. So you have to learn these technologies, which are very much important and useful. So now once you've mastered that, now you can get into the nitty-gritty of backend design and development principles, architectural patterns, learn how search engine work with backend, and so on and so forth, message brokers, containerization versus virtualization. Then you learn some technologies like GraphQL, which are essentially communication languages with databases, then graph databases, WebSockets, web servers, and building for scale. Building a database for a few users is totally different than to build a database for a million of users. So you have to keep that in mind. And so scalability is a major point of concern for every backend developer, so really take that into consideration. So essentially, this is the roadmap to become a backend developer, and if you follow on this road, you'll be able to accomplish wonderful things. So hopefully it's not too intimidating for you. Hopefully you have at least an introduction of what it takes to become a back-end developer, and hopefully you embark on this wonderful journey that is going to take you through a lot of learning. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you on the next one.